This is the Conversations with the Mind podcast, where we explore consciousness through conversations with interesting people. Our mission is to engage the collective mind piece by piece to bring greater clarity of mind to our listeners locally and across the planet, and to contribute to broaden the shared experiential knowledge and wisdom of existence. What's up, YouTube? I don't know if you guys can see Tank here, our co-host. He'll be joining us for the podcast today. Here we go. All right, folks, welcome back to Conversations with the Mind. This is episode 48, and we're sitting here with very special guests, Jake and Avery Sage. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, no need to be nervous.
Okay.
There's just millions of people listening to this award-winning episode.
Okay.
This one's up for Grammys. And
Yes. Wow.
So,
I feel
Telling
honored.
it.
yeah. Okay, so first question I always ask all my guests, and I want to hear it from both you guys, because obviously you guys are two different manifestations of individual consciousness, individual streams of consciousness. So what does the phrase conversations with the mind mean to you guys? And we'll start with, you want to start?
Sure.
Avery? Okay, so what does conversations with the mind mean to you? How does that land? What sort of images come up in your head when you hear that?
I was talking to someone that we were going to be on your podcast, and they were like, "Oh, what's it called?" And I told them, and they were like, "Oh, that's an interesting name." And I was like, "Yeah." And so I was kind of thinking about it, even though I didn't know it was a question. But to me, it just really means like openness with yourself and being that openness with yourself, but then sharing it with other people. That the conversation part, I guess. So, but that deeper, just like looking at I don't know. I said it already. But what's inside, and then sharing it with each other.
I'm gonna pick apart hers real quick before you
that's-
answer, because that's really interesting. So, I like to call that our inner verse, right? So, if this is our outer verse or our universe outside of us, like this is our inner verse, and I like how you're talking about being open with yourself. And what popped in my head right away is like, there's not a lot of people who are like 100% super open with themselves, or vulnerable, or willing to accept all the negative or all the flaws of themselves as well as all the positive things, right? Like, I know myself, like, it's tough to receive criticism, even though I know criticism is what helps me grow. But even more so, it's harder for me to accept compliments, right? When people say like positive things about me, I'm like, I don't know about that, right? So that's interesting, like being open with yourself. Talk a little bit more about that. What does that look like for you inside?
For me, I think it's really similar to what you said, just that idea of taking the good and the bad, and also letting people speak into my life in ways that I might kind of like deny to myself, things that I'm good at, like you said, or just what I want, or how, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but just like who I am, and like you said, the good and the bad, and living with that, but also growing in that and finding out who I am, like my best self, I guess.
So then that was the first part of it, is this journey of self-discovery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Through this conversation, this internal dialogue that we have at different parts of ourselves. But then the second part you said was like sharing that with other people. That's a very important aspect of it, right?
Definitely.
You can have all this knowledge of self and knowledge of the world and experience and things, but if we keep that to ourselves, like, what good is that?
Yeah.
Whereas if we share it with one other person, then it impacts one other person, and maybe it ripples out and affects other people. We share it with, like in a podcast format like this, right?
Yeah.
We share it with like a group of people, to those listeners out there, and then they share it with their friends, and they're like, oh, you got to hear this podcast, right? Then it has even bigger ripples. And then it holds more power. Like this knowledge you accumulate about yourself and about how you come to experience the world now can help other people in their journeys of self-discovery, or of discovering like what the hell this thing is that we're all living in.
Yeah,
right? That's
exactly.
Nice.
I like that a lot.
Okay, what about you, Jake? What does conversations with the mind mean to you?
When I think about like how I define the mind, and thoughts, processing, how we're wired, I guess. And so I think talking about that, and once again, I think sharing too in that conversation is kind of a shared thought of how we're wired and how we all kind of see and feel and interpret things differently that we all experience probably similarly. So, if that makes sense.
No, totally. And I'm glad that I have both you guys on the show at once.
Yeah.
You guys are a married couple. And I'm discovering this for myself, being newly married, but Callie and I seem to share a brain in a lot of ways. But we differ in a lot of ways. It's like we're two hemispheres of the same brain, you know, where she may be more emotional, empathetic, things like that. I'm more pragmatic and planning. You know, we complement each other
That's
in those
exactly
ways.
what we are.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Complementary, right?
Yes.
But I really wanted to have you on today, Jake, because of your professional background and your schooling. I think a lot of your schooling in, and I'm just going to say this as a general term, in Western medicine,
Yeah.
right? From that perspective, I got a lot of my training in psychology from Western medicine too, and there was a large focus on, like you said, how we're wired, but specifically how we're wired neurochemically, electrochemically, how we're wired in our nervous system, things like this, as opposed to maybe someone who was trained in more Eastern medicines. They may hear the terms wired this way, may think of like energy systems in the body or chakra systems, or we were talking about like dry needling and acupuncture the other day. And then someone from my background, from psychology or philosophy, I may think of wiring as being like behavioral patterns. So maybe not even a lot to do with the physiology, but more with like how our mind dictates our path in life. You know, so those three different
From one
versions of
very
wiring.
general term.
Right. But I wanted to have you on because I assumed, and I may be wrong, I assumed that you have the perspective of like your mind will go automatically to the wiring like between neurons and synapses and things like that. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, I guess so. I do occupational therapy, and like the huge kind of founding principle of it is that if we want your body to respond a certain way, we're gonna make it do something a certain way, and that's gonna cause a relationship with all the neurons in your body to now start becoming like that's its new normal. So if you had a stroke and your arm was not extending all the way, we're going to extend the heck out of your arm until that just becomes rewired to your brain that says my muscle can do that. So I think of a lot of what you said is from that kind of Western medicine standpoint, but a lot of it I think is also from environmental experiences as well. I think they connect pretty strongly.
It's almost Pavlovian in the way you guys recondition muscles, muscle memory. You know, we all know about muscle memory from our martial arts experience, right? That's oftentimes the best way to train something or to get your body to do something that you didn't think it could do is to do it over and over and over.
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
Yep. There's a principle, it's called Hebb's principle, and they said the nerves that fire together wire together. And so if you're putting something through emotion or you're performing activity over and over and over again, your brain starts to recognize that activity as normal over and over and over again. It becomes easier to do that activity, and then we call it second nature. Right?
And in psychology, we would say the same thing. The neurons that fire together wire together, and especially with like depression or like negative self-talk, right? That we all have. If we continually tell ourselves negative things about ourselves, it wires those parts of our brain together. We start to believe it. It becomes an identity, right? It becomes more than just a conversation in the mind. Then it becomes like, this is who I am. Now I'm depressed, right? And it's a matter of, in my opinion, it's a lot of different things, right? You got to rewire the physical neuron structures and the electrochemical signaling, but you also have to rewire the thinking patterns, rewire the behavior patterns, rewire all these things together. It's multimodal in the approach, right? And I think Western science falls short a lot of the times because we're so focused on like one methodology instead of, hey, let's take a combination of all the things together because we are this super complicated organism.
I think you're exactly right. I think also going for a quick, cheap fix because everything tends to be money centered and time is money, and so I know at least in the therapy world they want, hey, I know you said it's going to take you 4 weeks to get there. We want you to do it in 2 though, and so I think you're right. Anytime we have all these different components coming together, there's an easy way out, and it's not very effective. And so a lot of times I think it's a lot more difficult to actually sit down and target all those separate entities
Mm-hmm.
at the same time or together. So
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of self-awareness, it's not necessarily, like we were talking about before the podcast, it's not necessarily our place as human beings to know the reasons why we're here or what we're supposed to be doing with this life, but it is our responsibility, in the mere fact that we're here, it's our responsibility to do the best that we possibly can with what we have,
you know,
right? We may not even know what we have. We don't know what we're capable of, but what self-knowledge we do have, we need to use it to continue to better ourselves, but in my opinion, also like help other people as well.
Absolutely.
And you're a teacher too,
Yeah.
so you're like helping mold these little kids all the time. You're a 5th grade teacher, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you have to be like a generalist. You got to know all the subjects,
Yes.
and you're really helping to shape these kids and how they perceive reality at a very important time. What age group is that?
5th grade would probably be like almost
like 9 and 10.
9, 10, almost 11. I don't know.
Mhm.
Almost middle schoolers. They're the crazy age, I guess.
Why?
Because they're transitioning, so they're like, I think it's a lot of things. Like we're talking about all these different parts of being human, but like a lot of their like hormones and they're like growing up and kind of gaining their own independence. So it's a crazy time in their life. But yeah, like you said, a really important time to be molding and growing in them. So
Mm-hmm. I think this thought just popped in my head because I don't think I had this thought consciously when I was in 5th grade, but as a 5th grader in traditional schooling, Western schooling, that's like your first experience of being the top of the food chain.
definitely.
Oh yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah.
100%.
Like in K through 12, that's your first experience,
Mhm.
and then the very next year you're bottom of the barrel again in
Mhm.
6th grade, you know,
Mhm.
and then you get that again in 8th grade, and then bottom of the barrel. But for like you said, 5th graders, they're finally coming into who they are in relation to
Mhm.
other people too.
Yeah, definitely.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, they finally can have their own opinions and their own little friend groups, and I mean they have friend groups when they're little, but just like growing in that and becoming, they're
Mhm.
crazy.
I have a lot of interest in, and possibly a dissertation topic for my PhD on preventative mental health programs,
Okay.
especially for kids.
Yeah.
Because not only are we seeing like, overprescription or overprescribing of meds for like ADHD, ADD, overdiagnosis of bipolar, and all these things happening much younger ages. You know, a lot of these diagnoses going out, and in the DSM it's saying we can't even diagnose these things until a certain age, and yet these kids are getting diagnosed and medicated for these things
Yeah.
before they're fully developed.
Yeah.
Do you experience that, like kids, medicated kids in your
Yeah,
classrooms?
I'm not in. Last year, I experienced that a little bit, and then one little boy I know, he's been medicated for a long time, but I haven't experienced it personally in my classroom. But I know I've talked to parents about it and their idea of medicating, and it's kind of hard because they want to calm them down and settle them down, but I'm like, no, this is who this kid is. Like, they're so much energy and full of life, and like calming them down kind of worries me. But
So
I don't
that-
want to
yeah.
say it's good or bad, but
Sure,
it's,
but
it makes me worried.
I'll say it's bad.
Yeah.
I'll be the one who
Okay,
says it's
thank
bad.
you.
Okay.
It
Because-
scares
I agree
me.
with you.
Yeah,
I
because-
don't like it.
Yeah, if you think about it though, when these parents tell you like, you ask why do you medicate them, and they say because we need to slow them down. Yeah, but what's the root of why do you need to slow them down?
Yeah.
Is it because the kid needs to be slowed
Because they're
down?
getting in trouble in class, and then the parents don't know what else to do, and it's just there's
But
so many.
It's also probably because the parents
Oh yeah.
want the kid to slow
It's a
down.
quick, easy
Yeah.
fix.
Yeah, quick, easy fix, right?
Yeah.
Like, this kid is too hyper for me, therefore I'm gonna change them so that I am not gonna go crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's
Kids
hard.
have been crazy since kids
Forever.
were kids.
Yeah.
That's how they're supposed to be.
That's what kids do.
Yeah. So my idea for preventative mental health programs kind of stemmed out of this thing that I observed, that all these kids were way over medicated. I had adult clients coming to me for therapy saying, I've been on these antidepressants since I was 10 or 12, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Your brain chemistry is totally out of whack since you were a kid. You never had a chance to be normal. And so my idea is, if we can institute like a curriculum around consciousness, or a curriculum around like mindfulness or meditation for these kids, and just give them something, some information, some education on like, hey, you have a brain, but you also have this thing called a mind, and like we don't know what it is, but here's what we think we know, and
Yeah.
let's go explore it together. I feel like giving them the tools to gain emotional intelligence and maturity, teaching them how to cope with emotional states that don't feel good, using tools like their mindfulness and meditation, and being able to use these tools at a young age, I think can prevent a lot of mental health issues later in life that are mostly stemming out of trauma, that are stemming out of stress, that are stemming out of abuse, things like that, that if these kids had the tools at the elementary school or middle school age, then they were still going to experience trauma, but now they have the tools to deal with it instead of going to
working through it.
or going to like alcohol, or going to like suicide. Suicide's huge for kids these days, right? So that's my idea.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
I wanted to kind of pick your brain too, because you work with these kids.
Yes.
What are some ideas that you have for me on how I can maybe tailor like a mindfulness or meditation type program to kids? Like, I don't know, like what are fifth graders receptive to? Pictures, movies, videos, right?
Active things, activity.
So I have to make it like hands-on.
Yes,
Okay.
hands-on is definitely a big thing for kids now. I don't know if you know about this, and it's super awesome. I just found out about it last year. There's this program called Mind Yeti. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm.
It's exactly what you're talking about, except it's awesome. Mind Yeti. It is a program online that teachers can subscribe to, and I think that you could do so much more like with it, but it's beautiful. It's like meditation for kids, and it kind of is a video or a group of videos, I guess, that you can just choose if you're stressed, if they just need to breathe, if they need a break. Then you just turn off all the lights in the classroom, and I was in a classroom, I saw everybody lay on the floor, and just it plays, and even the teacher did it with them, and it was just like, it was beautiful to see the difference in, these hyperactive kids that just came back from lunch going psycho crazy, to them laying on the floor silently, to them starting their reading group afterwards, just calm as could be, ready to go, like very like in their own. I think there needs to be more build up to it. Like you were talking about wanting to talk to them about their brain and like what's going on in their feelings. So that Mind Yeti, I think, is an awesome way to insert that into the classroom, but I think you're right, like there's so much more we could do to prepare them and to prep them with more tools that they could do on their own, or they could just learn more about themselves. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm excited to see where you go with it, but you should definitely check that out.
I will.
It's amazing.
It sounds like it's, I mean, I've read research on mostly in the upper, what is it, the northwest of the U.S., like Oregon and Washington. They've had some good research on mindfulness and meditation-based programs in schools, and like kids getting better grades and having less behavioral issues at school, but then also taking the skills home with them and having less behavioral issues in the home too. The parents are like, yay, our kids are more manageable now, and I think that can lead to less over-medication, less stress later in life, greater ability to cope and adapt, these skills that are not necessarily taught in school, like, hey, you might need to be adaptable later in life. What if you get fired from a job? Now what are you going to go do?
Might be important.
Yeah, so I think it's important to start addressing some of these underlying bigger life issues,
Agreed.
not just teaching like, hey, this is the Constitution and blah, not just facts, but like, hey, how do we teach you guys how to go beyond critical thinking to now let's teach you guys how to interact with yourself and the environment. So that, because our kids are, it's corny, our kids are our future.
It's true. It's okay.
But we're only going to take this conversation so far, right?
Yeah.
It's the people that we influence and that we teach that are going to answer the questions that we're asking right now during this podcast.
I'd say, kind of to go off what you're just talking with Avery about for your dissertation, when I was at a pediatric rotation in Boston, they did a lot of kind of mindfulness, and it was with really little kids, starting intervention. So it was basically having
Like how
them
old?
2, 3,
Oh, wow.
4. Yeah, so it kind of varied. Most of the kids in the clinic were different diagnoses, but a lot of them were regulation issues. that they could not regulate how they were feeling because it's new to them. They don't know what's going on yet. And so, and I think this pertains clearly past 5th grade. But I think that a lot of what they did is okay, you just did something you shouldn't have done. Now, was it because you were too much energy? Was it because you were mad? Was it because you were sad? Like, and trying to really pinpoint these. And so what I saw from that in just a week was kids going from not understanding why they were getting in trouble and why they were doing something bad and what was causing it, to saying, okay, every time I did this, I was way too excited. So what do I have to do to calm down before I start doing this? And it was just really cool to almost start like that problem solving conversation with kids. And then what I also saw from that was a lot of education for parents. So now parents at home, instead of just yelling at their kid and spanking them or putting them in time out or whatever the parents do to discipline their kid, it's saying, okay, look, where were you at? Were you at this revved up zone because you had too much energy? Were you angry? Why were you angry? Were you sad? What caused you to be sad? Why did you respond this way? And obviously with 2-year-olds, maybe that doesn't work as well. But when you start getting 3 and 4 years old, they understand that to an extent. And so I think that if we can educate parents as well, then they have an advocate at home with them. And obviously this doesn't go for all parents or caretakers. They're, we're not all perfect people, and I think that's easier said than done. But I think that if I'm going to send somebody with exercises home, I'm going to hope they do them. If they don't, then they don't get much better. If they do them, then they get a little better. That's the same idea. If you send something with parents home saying, hey, look, try this. Your kid gets in trouble at school every day because he talks without raising his hand or whatever, whatever it is. That was my problem. I always get so excited because I felt like I knew all the answers. And, but just somewhere to just understand, so you're self-perceiving what is causing it. And I think that was really powerful. And I take that. I'm not a parent, but I have a nephew who's 2, and I started doing some of that same stuff to him, and it was just like instantly a whole like night and day shift. And it was really cool to see. So
Yeah, I think when I was young, I hated my mom for doing this, but I'm so grateful that she had the insight to do this as a single mom raising 2 boys. But sometimes when I would get in trouble with her, part of my punishment would be to write her an essay or write her a paper on like why I did what I did, and I think it gets to this aspect that you're talking about teaching, that goes beyond just teaching right or wrong or teaching facts or teaching, even up to this point, what do we learn in college? We learn a bunch of facts, but essentially college teaches people how to think critically, right? I'm talking about going beyond that, right? What's past critical thinking? Well, let's teach these kids the why behind the reason, teach them how to explore themselves, teach them how to slow down and ask themselves, oh, why did I just punch my little sister, when she took my toy, and having them slow down to answer those questions. We see it every day in like our society, like even adults, they'll do something reactively or reflexively in response to somebody flipping them off, that just cut them off or whatever, and then they'll, reflexively go flip them off, and that they never stop to ask, like, well, why did I just retaliate in that situation? Why did I just cut that person off? Why did I feel the need to step on my coworker to get a leg up? Most adults don't have those skills to be able to slow down and ask until it's too late.
And why would they? Because we're not teaching those kinds of skills in school, and not even when you get to college do you go through that kind of stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that goes
crazy.
beyond college learning.
Definitely does. It's like.
So where do you think you learned that? How did you guys become self-reflective?
Well, I guess I can answer this first.
Yeah, sure.
So I grew up with my grandma. My grandpa died when I was little, and me and my sister didn't get along, so me and my grandma were good friends. And I rarely got in trouble, mostly because my sister would get in trouble, and I was scared.
Older sister?
Older sister. I was scared to have the same punishments, and I always liked when she was in trouble and I wasn't. It made me feel better. But anyway, I started, like everyone else, not like that at all, and I had an ego, I had pride, and then it all got taken away from me, and I was humbled very significantly. And after that, I was like, oh wow, like we're all people, right? We all just figure this out together, and I think we all go through our own kind of crap, if you will, but I think as soon as I was humbled,
How did you get humbled?
Sounds
like it's a particular situation.
Yeah, I had a pretty significant injury in high school. I lost some scholarships to go play football, and that to me was my identity. That was my whole world, and I was on top of it, and it didn't work out, and I couldn't understand why, and maybe there isn't a reason. I don't, that's up for debate, but at the end of the day, I learned a lot from it that, we're just people, and it doesn't matter how smart, talented, amazing you are, like, all the stuff we still have, stuff we struggle with, we still have to go through all this stuff, and I think that was the first time I hit a low point, really, in my life, and I didn't know how to deal with it, so I just started dealing with it, and that came from, counseling, talking to friends, a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, who taught you to deal with it in the way that you did?
It was just a lot of trial and error, a lot of poor trials, and...
But you mentioned a couple people,
yeah.
Like your therapist was
really didn't like my therapist at all, actually. It just wasn't my thing at the time. I was still like, kind of screw everybody. I don't need anybody in my life. I'll do it myself. And then that didn't work. And then I go back, and I didn't like them, and that didn't work. And I go back, and but no, it was a lot of, I would try it the way I thought was right, and then it didn't work out. And so then I go back and try it a different way, and then it didn't work out. And then finally I got to the point where it's like, I got to start being real with myself, because I know a lot of these things. Like, I know I'm being selfish. I know I'm feeling sorry for myself. I know I'm feeling angry, and I'm just not dealing with those things. So then I started to just accept help. I started to actually talk about it. And when I started talking about my struggles and my difficult things, it got a lot easier to recognize, oh wow, like other people are dealing with this too. And then we could all kind of go through that together. Even though it was different, and I stress that a lot, we all go through hard things, just different hard things. And so they don't always add up, but we all go through something that's difficult. And I feel like we can all share that struggle, and that, I think, helped me a ton with kind of realizing, hey, I just need to be real with myself, because that person over there is hurting, and they're going through something. And like, yeah, maybe I don't know what it's like to get hit by a car and have serious PTSD after an accident, but, I had something that was difficult for me to go through, so I know what it's like to go through something difficult. I think we all have been through something difficult.
Yeah, I think we can all share the weight of the pain that
Absolutely.
it means to be human.
Yeah.
I have this sticker on my, it's on my other water bottle, but it's from Rick and Morty, and it says, "Existence is pain," and that's a Buddhist philosophy, that life is suffering. That's just plain and simple. It's gonna be painful at certain times, and you have to. Part of life, part of learning, is to learn to maybe deal with the pain more effectively.
Yeah.
I can totally identify with your story too, because and the podcast listeners know about my story too. But tearing my ACL early in my jiu-jitsu career, having my entire identity tied up in my athleticism, and then losing my identity in one instant, only to find myself lost back into substance abuse, back in self-harm behaviors, things like that, and depression, and then finding, like you said, through trial and error, like finding this pathway to understanding that I'm more than an athlete, that I'm a person, and that other people feel this way too. And now now I can, I'm being given an opportunity to work on other parts of my life that I've been neglecting. That is the reason, by the way, that I assigned to that happening. At the time, I was like, there's no possible good reason for this to happen, and I've chosen to say that it gave me an opportunity, or forced me to sit down and take care of the areas of my life that I had been neglecting because of my athletics, and because I was so wrapped up in it. And that later inspired me to become a sports psychology consultant, because I didn't have that person who knew about loss of identity through injury. And now I had been through it myself, and I wanted to be that guiding light for others who would find themselves in that situation and being totally lost. And I want to be that person to say, hey, there is a way out. I've been through it.
Yeah.
And here's the way I found, like you said, sharing your piece helps you heal yourself.
When I think when people understand, oh, they went through this too. Like, it's doable. It's not so far away. It's not this huge wave crashing down. It's just another wave, and we're going to keep swimming in and, fighting the current together. But yeah, it makes it something that's so, what we see at the time is insurmountable. Like, how am I ever going to get over this? This was everything to like, oh, okay, this is just the next step. This is just the next part. And I think when someone has experienced that and they can kind of help guide you through that a little bit, then I think it makes it more real that, hey, this isn't the end of the world. This isn't the last stop. This is just one of the stops along the road. So I think that's...
Have either of you guys ever had the experience of getting any advice or mentorship from people who have not been through it, who are suggesting a way to get through it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I didn't like my counselor.
Because he hadn't been through what
I had
you'd been
no
through,
idea.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I experienced that too. I just recently was working at an addiction clinic, and there were two of us therapists, but I was the only one with substance abuse in my actual history. And I'd hear that from a lot of the clients, that they prefer talking to somebody who'd been through it. It was just a
more
different
real.
experience, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, we're all sitting at this table, we're all martial artists, right? It's like, would we go into the gym and expect to learn jiu-jitsu from somebody who's a swimmer? No, probably not.
Not good jiu-jitsu.
Right, no. Maybe YouTube jiu-jitsu
Yeah.
or something like that.
Stroke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I want to ask you guys about that too, because that's how I know you guys, is through the martial arts world. And I met you guys first a couple years ago when you were training at a different gym. And then in the last 6 months, you've started training at Z's with us more permanently. And Jake, you've been training with us for the last couple months more permanently. I was hoping you guys could tell the listening audience a little bit about your journey through martial arts. How did you guys find it? What were your reasons for getting into it? And how did you guys find yourselves at the place you are now? I always find that a fascinating journey. It's like a hero's journey in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Well, Jake's part of my reason, so he should share his reason first.
Okay.
Well, I tried wrestling in college, and I got beat up a lot. My last match, I got slammed on my shoulder pretty good, and after that, I just couldn't compete, and I decided I didn't love it as much as I needed to compete at a Division I level, and one of my teammates at the time was Justin Gonzalez, and he was telling me about the gym he trained at and how he was fighting, and I said, okay, we'll check it out. And so I started boxing, and they said, hey, for $25 a month, you could start Muay Thai. And I said, oh, that sounds way better, because I was terrible at boxing, and I wanted to kick people. And so I started doing Muay Thai and absolutely loved it. And then I got to the point where I was getting head kicked so many times because I couldn't keep my right arm up because my shoulder was just completely trashed that I said, okay, I'm going to have surgery, and then we'll come back to it. So I had shoulder surgery, and then they started jiu-jitsu at the gym that I was training at, and so I said, that's great. Like, I was a former wrestler, like, jiu-jitsu should fit right in. I was...
So, hold up. So,
Yeah.
your initial reasons for getting into martial arts came out of this place of, like you had a competitive nature, but you couldn't compete in the sport that you wanted to, and so you finally found something else that you could do.
Yeah,
and martial arts was that thing.
Exactly. Rec flag football wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah, for sure.
You go from something so physical in nature to
Yeah.
something absolutely not physical. It was very hard.
Okay.
But yeah, so then started doing jiu-jitsu, started competing, and then I was like, wow, this practices are way too hard to not actually fight. Like, it's too much crap to go through to not compete. And
So sacrifice every single day you step on the mat.
yeah, so
Especially if you come to my jiu-jitsu class.
exactly. That's why I don't show up. No, I'm just
Mhm.
kidding.
I was like, is that tonight? I don't know what day it is.
But yeah, so then my first fight was kind of a short notice fill-in fight against a guy who was pretty tough, and ended up winning. And after that, I was just kind of hooked. So it's just, there's something about the adrenaline that you get when you're competing, and you have every chance to lose, but you kind of control your own destiny. And it's one of the few things I feel like, especially sports-wise, that you get to control every aspect of it.
So that's a big part of your inspiration now. Is it's an aspect of your life where you feel maybe more control than other areas.
Well, I just like the fact that I can outwork somebody and it show. Versus in football, like, I could be the best offensive lineman, not saying that I was, but I could be the best offensive lineman on a very terrible team, and we could still not win a single game. And I could have, an amazing performance, and it wouldn't matter. Or I could be the best basketball player on a team and score 60 points, and we still lose.
Because of the team.
But in
Team
fighting and jiu-jitsu, you kind of control every aspect of competition, and obviously you're competing against someone in a very direct sport. And when you lose, there's no one else to blame. When you win, you have a whole bunch of people that helped you along the way, but you won. So
It's interesting. And I find the same thing. Like jiu-jitsu gives me a lot more control over myself. It's like a training ground to learn how to control my emotions and my physiological things, but also how to control another person's body.
Absolutely.
Right? So that they're no longer in control of their body, but I am.
Yeah.
To us, having experienced it, there's that aspect. But to an outsider looking in at like MMA or jiu-jitsu, it seems like chaos. It seems like, how can you possibly be in any control in the middle of a fight?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, people automatically go to this fear response.
I have a really good friend who's been trying to get into fighting for a couple of years, and his wife is not letting it happen. And because she's scared he's going to get hurt. And I was like, well, what if you got hurt walking outside? Is she going to keep you inside the house the rest of your life? You know, like, I just think there's so many things that we worry about too, and I think they're valid. I didn't start wrestling for a while because I was like, oh, that's kind of weird, and I don't really want to get hurt. And then football, I could justify that. No, my head was fine, my back was fine, my knees were okay, you know, and I was getting beat the heck up. So, I think that is something that's, to the outside world, it looks terrifying, but I think the art of that control and that aspect is incredible.
And that's where the art comes in. It
Absolutely.
is an artistry to control your own body in space.
Yeah.
Right? And to have complete control over different muscle groups and fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers at an instant, and to have, in my realm, teaching myself to have mental control over things like my metabolism, my heart rate, my breathing rate, things like that, being able to, mentally heal myself faster with the placebo effect, rather than working against myself and saying this is going to take forever and poor me and all this stuff. So learning how to use my mind to help improve and optimize bodily functions, but also my external expression too.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something amazing about being 6'3", 300 pounds, and being able to roll with someone who's 140 pounds and not hurt them.
Yeah.
But then be able to in a very specific way when I want to. But when we're training, there's so many people so much smaller that it's like it wouldn't be hard for me to hurt them. It's just a matter of having that control that, hey, like, we're going to be okay because I'm in control of the situation. I'm not going to just break your arm on accident or hurt you. And I think that, especially the more that we do this sport, the better we get at that. Just having that awareness and control over an entire situation. So
yeah, and that's one thing I think a lot of people kind of pass over the martial arts with, is that it teaches us so much more about ourselves and about how to navigate this world that we live in beyond just the mats. Like, yeah, we learn a lot of technical moves, and I'll learn how to break your arm 10 different ways, and I'll learn all these things. But by learning about myself, by learning that I can handle someone like you with your weight sitting on top of me, wanting to physically attack me, and I can slow myself down and breathe nice and slow and keep a calm mind.
absolutely.
Like,
That's
to me,
empowering.
yeah, now I can take that out into the real world, and when I feel like life is like sitting on top of my chest, punching me in the face, I can remember that this happens to me on the mat, and I can just take a deep breath and just do what I do there. It's like, if I can handle that, I can handle anything else in life.
Absolutely.
And that's the piece that I think gets neglected,
Yeah.
So Avery, what was your introduction to martial arts through Jake?
Through Jake. So I knew he was going to practices for a while. I supported him, obviously, just in his sports. I've always supported him, I guess. Never really went to a practice with him. Then his first fight came around, and I was terrified. And I just remember going to this fight and being so anxious and so overwhelmed with fear. Like we said, that outside person looking in, it's a very terrifying thing. I'm pretty sure the entire time from when his walkout song started until when they raised his hand, I was like bawling my eyes out. And then when they raised his hand, I cried some more because I was so excited. But after that, I was just like, okay, like, that was pretty cool. He didn't get hurt. It seems awesome. Then I just came in and watched a couple of his practices. Didn't really train that much, but came in and hung out with the team and saw the environment more, and I kind of fell in love with, I don't know, all of it. It just seemed fun. It just seemed like...
Did the people draw you in at first? Like, it sounds like you started having a relationship with some of his training partners. Like, they became your friends too.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know how it is at the
Yes.
gym. They're like, hey, you need to come out on the
Hey,
mat.
yes, no, that's exactly. They basically dragged me on the mat for my first training session. I remember, and I was like, no, I'm just gonna sit and watch, and they literally forced me. But it was great. It was fun. And then we did all sorts of crazy things and trained a lot, and I started to like it more and more. I didn't really ever think, oh yeah, I want to do this and then I want to fight like Jake. No, that was not really the idea. It was just more of, oh, I need exercise. Like, it's fun to hang out with Jake. It's fun to have an environment we can be together in.
But why fighting? Most people don't go to fighting for exercise.
I
right?
know, right? I don't know. I was totally a swimmer and basketball player and runner, like the easy things that you don't get hit or hurt. Sorry, they're not easy. Oh, okay. Anyways, they're really hard sports. I'm sorry. I just meant the less physical sports was definitely what I was into. I wrestled in middle school for like 1 year, and I was
Nice.
terrible, but it was fun. But no, just going into fighting jiu-jitsu. I did my first jiu-jitsu tournament, I think, after a week or 2 weeks of training. I literally got out on the mat and got laid on for 3 solid matches, and it was really embarrassing, and I cried again. But after that, I was just like, okay, like, I'm in like you guys were talking about, that control. Like, I was like, I can get better at this. I can work at this and actually do better. And so then when we started training Muay Thai and stuff, I got excited. And it wasn't until probably last summer or the fall, really. We were in Iowa for a little bit, training with some really awesome people, that I was really like, okay, like, I want to fight. And I don't want to just fight. Like, I want to be good at fighting. And that was when, like, I really just, like, sparked this, oh, like, women can do this and be awesome. And I was like, I want to be awesome. Like, and so, I don't know, I started training more, and I wasn't really working when we were in Iowa. I was just training all day long and training at night with him, and it was awesome. And then coming back and training at C's has just really, like, been a fire for me and really awesome. So I'm just excited about it as a sport. I think it gives you opportunity, again, like you guys said, that control piece, not only jiu-jitsu, but also, like, fighting and Muay Thai. And I'm just in that kickboxing Muay Thai phase right now, but that hope to advance and to keep working on my jiu-jitsu so I can move into MMA and just keep getting better. That's why I love this sport, because you can always get better.
I'll also say that I think when she started watching fights, I don't even know who she watched, but there was some girl fight she watched, and she thought that girl was a badass. And she was
Megan
like,
Anderson.
oh, there you go. It's like,
The
I want
badass.
to be like her,
Yes.
and that also helped.
Yes, that helped a lot. Because I was like, wow, there's these awesome women role models, and I think they're so powerful and beautiful. There's so many of them now, but she was definitely someone that I got to meet her, and I was a little bit of a fangirl, but it's okay.
That's awesome. No, that's
Yes.
awesome. So when was your first fight?
October
Of last year.
Of last year. Yeah.
So not even a year ago
Nope.
was your first, and it was kickboxing, right?
Yes.
First kickboxing fight, and that was how many months after starting
Like
training?
serious training. I don't know.
Probably like 5, 4.
Yeah, I mean, I had been like rolling jiu-jitsu for almost a year by then, but yeah, serious training stand up probably like 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
So I was anxious, but it was awesome. It was a great experience. I remember Jake was in my corner, and it was so awesome. Afterwards, I lost a horrible decision, but that's fine. It was a great fight. I lost, and I was really bummed, and I just remember like hugging her and walking off, and I wasn't even sad. I just started like crying. Okay, I'm really emotional.
That's okay.
All of your guests can know that now. But I was just crying, and then I realized I was like, I'm not even sad right now. And I had her blood all over me. I broke her nose, I think. I was pretty excited. No, just kidding. Anyways, but we walked back to the locker room, and I was just kind of freaking out because her blood was on me. I was like, get a towel, like, get it off. And I'm crying, and Jake's like, why are you crying? And I was like, that was so awesome. Like, I was like, I want to do it again tomorrow. Like, so pumped, so energized, and it just brings so much life. So, yeah, it's just an awesome sport.
So, Jake, how does it feel for you, having started in the martial arts and then seeing your wife come into it and then seeing her compete? I know for me, like, oftentimes it's more stressful for the spouse on the outside of the ring than it is for the person in the ring, because once you're in the ring or the cage, like, you're focused, your adrenaline is pumping, like, you don't feel pain, you don't, and it goes by in a flash. But if you're on the outside of the cage, it seems like everything's going so slow, and like you have no control over the outcome, right? And you're literally watching, feeling helpless
Yeah.
to affect
Yeah.
watching your loved one get their face smashed in, right?
Mhm.
So how did it feel for you?
We recently found out that I have a problem with empathy.
Recently, Jake found out recently.
I'm not very empathetic as a person.
Okay.
And so once again, it's like, hey, you've been training hard. You deserve that win, or you were pretty lazy. Let's fix it, you know. And so I would say when she started fighting, the first fight, I was mostly working with her, and we were in Iowa. And we came back, and she didn't have a really great camp. She didn't really have a whole lot of anything that was set in stone. Not a lot of consistency in daily training. But as soon as we came to Z's, where she had that consistent training, she had a consistent coach, and I didn't have to be the coach. It worked so much better because a coach relationship with your wife, I don't know if you realize this, is not always ideal, if ever.
Most of the time it's not.
Yeah.
It's
I don't know.
weird.
Yeah, and I don't know how some UFC fighters do that
Yeah.
and train with their training partners. Speaking of partner, my wife just walked in. Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
And the dogs, obviously, with their contribution to the podcast as co-hosts, and they're barking. But yeah, so it's tough to watch your spouse get in there.
It is, but
Yeah,
she also
always.
hasn't really been beat up yet, so there hasn't been a lot of like anxiousness. She got head kicked pretty good this last fight, and that was one of the times I was like, "Just keep your hands up," but it wasn't like, "Oh no, she's hurt," you know. Like she's been pretty dominant in all of her fights so far, so I haven't had a whole lot of worry and fear yet. She trains pretty hard. And
So that was your non-empathetic response, right? Keep your hands up.
yeah.
And what would you have preferred to have heard, like, after the head kick from your
Well,
husband?
maybe not during the fight. If he would have said
Oh.
something like during the fight, I would think it would distract me. But oh my gosh, are you okay?
Uh,
Is your head? Oh my goodness.
That was probably the second response.
Yeah,
the second
it
response.
is. He always comes back with empathy after he realizes, okay, that was a little intense. Let's bring it back for this emotional person.
yeah.
That's me, but yeah. But I've seen him get pretty beat up, and let me tell you, it's terrifying.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was horrifying.
Well, you said you were, like, bawling the whole time.
Okay,
watching
that wasn't
That
his
was
first
when
fight.
I didn't even get beat up in that fight.
He didn't get beat up in that fight. His
My last fight.
his last
I
fight.
got just the piss beat out of me.
What happened in that one?
Yikes.
I got rocked the first shot, and I had never been rocked before, and so then I had never recovered, and I just kept getting rocked, and then I forced a bad throw because I was like, well, I'm not beating him on my feet. I kicked the crap out of his legs and slowed him down, but I still getting beat up, so I tried to land on top, saying if I can get on top, I could end the fight, and I landed on bottom, and he landed in full mount, so straddling on my belly, and just beat the crap out of me.
And I was terrified.
So you were watching this from the outside, and
Yeah.
what were you thinking?
Oh, so many things. I don't even know. That was a long time ago. No. Yeah. I don't know. It was hard to watch. It was just like, oh my gosh, I know that he knows what to do. So I was like, what's happening? Like, why isn't he doing this? But then, like, hearing, he's like, oh yeah, like, I really have never been hit that hard before. And it's like, oh yeah, being hit in the head, experiencing what it feels like to be hit in the head pretty hard. I'm like, yeah, I understand that. But it's really hard to watch that. I love watching when he wins and when he's kicking somebody else's butt. I'm like, yeah. And then when it's opposite, I'm like, okay, we gotta work on this. But
Yeah, Callie says when she watches my jiu-jitsu competitions, she's a ball of nerves too. Even though, like you said, like she knows, like she's super confident in my abilities,
Exactly.
and you know, she tells me, you know, I'm her superhero. So like I know she has this in her mind that and she sees me, you know, on the mat in practice. So, but it's difficult to
Yeah.
see, you know, me get in sticky situations.
When
or
there's
something
that
like
chance of being hurt or serious
Mhm.
injury or getting beat up, yeah, it's always more scary.
Mhm.
But if you're just dominating every single person, which at some point everyone else gets really good too, and
And yet, we are willing to sacrifice arm and leg and limb and neck
for fun.
For fun.
for friendly competition.
Yeah. What does that say about us?
I don't know.
Maybe we're the crazy
Reevaluate,
side of
yeah.
the crazy side of consciousness
Yeah,
a little
exactly.
bit. Mhm. But you know, I would say, you know, what we do is not so crazy, and what some people do, just you know, sitting on the couch and wasting their life away. I think that's crazy. You know, we're being given this once in a lifetime. You know, it's cheesy phrase. Once in a lifetime opportunity to make the most out of our life. And you know, I look around, and as a therapist, I see that all the time too. Like people come to me, and oftentimes the story is just that they're sitting and just waiting for life to pass them by, and it's saddening. You know, our group of friends are the type of people who go out and they get stuff done, you know, and I think it's because we push each other in the gym and we push ourselves. I don't think a lot of people have things that they do in their life that challenge them like we do.
Yeah, like you said, it's such a challenge, I think, to show up every day, and I think that builds so much character and so much dedication that you start to realize, oh, like this applies in my regular life too. But a lot of people, like you said, don't get that. So.
And I think something you kind of talked about earlier about just knowing, hey, I can be this uncomfortable physically in a practice, and then I can translate that outside of life. I think there's something, especially with this sport in general, that you get this excitement and comfort being uncomfortable, and you get this there's not that fear and anxiousness with being uncomfortable because you've been there and you were okay afterwards. And so I think that translates really well. But I think a lot of people that don't have something that makes them uncomfortable, where they're forced to fight through that a little bit, I think that they just choose not to be uncomfortable because it's easier. I think there's less stress, there's less worry, there's less risk if you're not uncomfortable. Everything's kind of easy and comfortable.
Right. So life's not supposed to be easy, you know?
No.
So, it seems like that's common sense, right? We know that life's not supposed to be easy. Like I said before, life is suffering. That's the Buddhist gentle way of putting it, that life is not going to be easy. And yet, with this knowledge that we know that it's not going to be easy, people still seek the easy way, you know?
Yeah.
Why? It's like we're putting ourselves in these unwinnable situations, you know, where we're expecting easiness, and then we're disappointed when it's not easy.
Yeah. And then we give up.
Right.
And then we're unhappy with where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what helps you guys not give up?
Yeah, go for it.
Give up in hard things. A lot. I don't know. I would say a big part of me growing in my self-awareness has been to deal with hard things and to pull myself out of like feeling sorry for myself or depression or just my past and my youth. Like pulling myself up from that, I was like, it was very clear to me I could either sit there and be this person that's sad and not doing anything about it, or I could work harder and grow in that. And it's taken me a really long time, I think, to grow in my own confidence and in who I am and my identity. And I think there's always setbacks in that. But just constantly working at it and constantly doing, like you were saying a lot, just instead of just sitting on the couch and wasting your life away, like actually doing things. For me, it has a lot to do with my faith and just, my faith is really important to me. It helps me with that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But,
but yeah, putting yourself in like challenging situations
and
then
just growing.
And having the faith to know that you're going to be okay.
Yeah, exactly. And seeing, okay, I've done this before. I've dealt with harder things. I can do better. And seeing, okay, you really screwed that up. Why and how and what does that change for your life in the future, and how can you adjust and keep growing? I think the people I've met in the gym and also just the gym has helped me build my, like, kind of that suck it up. Like, you got to get past this. You can't sit here and weep and be sad. You have to grow and be stronger from it and push on and have that great life that you want. And I just love the idea that miracles come from ashes, and like no matter what and how hard something was, something beautiful is going to come from it. And that's just really something that I try to keep in my heart on the daily, and I just try to be really positive and grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like some of the most beautiful things come from some of the most destructive, or some of the ugliest, you know, as we would judge it as ugly. You know, like one of my favorite flowers is the lotus flower. But lotus flowers grow out of muck and like this black mud. Yeah. It's like nobody wants anything to do with it, but then the most beautiful flower emerges from it, you know. It's through struggle, I believe, through struggle and challenge that we grow and we blossom and we really know and figure out who we are and get to see all those beautiful parts of ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So how about you, Jake? Like, how do you what have you used in your life to, you know, in those, because we all go through those times in our life where we feel like quitting.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
one thing I love about jiu-jitsu the most, is that you feel like quitting almost on a daily basis. And you have to face that side of yourself, that part of your brain, that conversation in your mind that's saying, hey, you're not strong enough, you don't have enough cardio, it's just not your day, let's be lazy.
Yeah.
You know, how do you get past that? How do you defeat that so that you don't quit in those moments?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of it is surrounding myself with the right people. I think that's a huge part. I think even though it's an individual competition, it's definitely a team sport, and life in general, I think, is the same way. I think, we live our own life, but it's a team effort, and I don't think we get anywhere by ourselves, really. I think everything is...
Life is a team effort.
Yeah,
we go so
absolutely.
much further with each other than we ever would alone.
One of the things, as you're asking this, that just kept like standing out to me is just this idea of being forged by fire. Like it's hard to sharpen a real good sword or knife without something really hot. And so I think, you know, putting ourselves or going through that struggle, going through that, I think it's just preparing us for bigger, more difficult journeys. And I'm a huge, I guess, to go second what Avery's saying, I think faith is a huge thing for me as well. That the idea that like there's a plan behind what's going through, because there's a lot of hard things that I'm like, I don't even try to understand anymore, because I'm like, I'm not getting there, I'm not figuring it out, and it still sucks. And now what? And just knowing that it's like, you know, I don't need to understand it right now, and that's okay. And I think probably the last thing that keeps me from quitting, when things get hard, I try not to take anything really too seriously. And I think that a lot of people they probably get frustrated by that more than they appreciate it, but it's one of those things that I don't think that life has to be serious to be better. I don't think that it has to be serious to get through hard times. I think for me, not being serious and not being stressed out and not being overwhelmed helps me deal with a lot of things, because I just don't, like, I still get overwhelmed like everybody else. I still get stressed out, but I think that just having that kind of easygoing mentality and everything, it's going to be all right whether I stress about it or not. I'm wasting a ton of energy by being pissed off, being angry, being sad, being whatever else to deal with it. I'm just going to deal with it. And I think that kind of plays a big role. I guess that backs up my faith a lot, is that, you know, I don't need to worry about it, because what's going to happen is going to happen. And so me being more whimsical about something, or less stressed out, or less serious about it, helps me just find out what's next and go get through it, because I don't sit there and dwell on it or whatever it is, you know. I think it's just, life's too short, so.
Nice. Yeah, that acceptance piece is huge, and I think that's where a lot of people get caught up, is accepting that we don't know,
Yeah.
and accepting that it may not be our place to know, but still going for it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, not giving up just because we may not have the answer, but still seeking. You
Yeah.
know, it's about this. It's about the journey. It's about having the courage to keep looking,
Yeah.
even if we know we may never find it. You know, and that's a big fuel for me, and what keeps me going when I feel like quitting, and when I feel like, you know, why the hell do I even need to be studying consciousness and having these conversations with people if we're never going to get anywhere, we're never going to get the answer that we're trying to put our finger on? Well, it's not about getting the answer. I think if I actually found the answer, I'd be bored.
Your podcast would be over.
Yeah, that'd be the end of the show. But, you know, it's about the seeking. It's about the journey. It's
Yeah.
about getting a new bit of knowledge, a new jewel of knowledge with every single podcast guest, with every episode.
And what I tell people a lot, like, I love dealing and working with people that are going through struggles and are going through difficult times, and more as like a peer and like a brother than like a guidance kind of way. But you know, I tell everybody that I talk to that's going through anything, like, just running towards that discomfort, like, just embrace it and run towards it, because you don't know what's on the other side till you get there. And if it's bad, it's bad. You figure it out once you're there. If it's good, then you'd have never known, because of all the anxiousness and nervousness and scared and all the other feelings that you feel going through whatever you're going through. So I just think that that's something that I also am really a big proponent of, is just running towards it with, you know, both feet going
And open arms.
yeah.
And on that note, we're going to take a quick commercial break.
I'm sore from practice. this yesterday.
No, it's all good. All right, so we're back here with Avery and Jake Sage, and we left you guys with a little bit of a cliffhanger. So Jake was just about to open up a whole new can of worms. So we left you guys with the phrase, and I am totally on board and believe in this too, of when you're feeling some sort of pain, physical pain, emotional pain, situational pain, whatever, spiritual pain, to go towards that pain, right? Rather than what seems like more of a go-to response or the easy way, right? Which is to turn around and escape the pain, which is what I feel a lot of people in our culture especially do with booze and gambling and sex and any number of things that we try and numb ourselves out with. But here's this weird concept of turning towards the pain, and it's scary for sure to turn towards these things, but in order to grow, like you're talking about, we have to push our way through it. And you said right before the commercial break that we don't know what's on the other side of that pain until we break through it. And if we keep avoiding it and keep running away from it, we're never going to break through. We're never going to see what opportunities lie at the other end.
0% chance of anything good.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about, especially in your field, occupational therapy. Talk about going towards the pain. I've talked about this a little bit in past podcasts about somatic therapies that I do during psychedelic integration therapies or anything like that, where we there's techniques where if you're feeling trauma or tension in a certain part of your body, then applying additional pressure to that body part or having the client flex that muscle group even tighter, and having them hold it and connect with that feeling of intensified pain beyond what they're normally feeling, and then releasing it will produce a relieving effect or a releasing effect. Tension, psychic tension, that works the same way.
Yeah.
So you got to go towards the things that are scaring you, towards the depressive thoughts, in order to really deal with them.
Yeah. So in OT, occupational therapy, that setting changes so much depending on what your population is and where you work. I worked predominantly in a hand therapy clinic most recently, and so like a very general physical example is someone came in with a rotator cuff repair, and we're trying to get that puppy moving again, and if someone comes up and they don't have the motion because they've been stuck in a sling for 12 weeks or whatever, well, now we got to start getting your arm, because for the rest of your life, if your arm stays 20 degrees of motion, you can't really do anything. So some of that is incredibly painful, and we're just kind of cranking on that arm to get it all the way over your head, because that's a normal range of motion for you. So when that hurts, I always tell people that this isn't going to be your favorite thing we do today, but you'll thank me for this in a year, because in a year you're not going to remember how much it sucked right now. In a year it's just going to be like, that sucked, but gosh, I can reach on the top shelf and grab out a can of soup or whatever. So a lot of that is just kind of embracing and understanding, hey, this is going to suck.
And it's getting somewhere.
Yeah, there's nothing fun about this except for the fact that your arm is getting better every time we do this. And after one session, maybe you don't see a huge difference. But after 4, 5, 6 weeks of therapy, then your arm's going all the way up, and it doesn't hurt as bad, and it moves better, and you're stronger. All those things start happening, and then you don't really think about all the pain that first couple sessions was of just moving moving that shoulder back. So in a very just objective sense, that's kind of embracing that and running towards that and being okay with it. Because at the end, if we don't do anything, it's not going to be painful at all. You're just not going to move it. And you'll lock down, and you'll never have motion, and you have to go back in and redo surgery again. And then if you don't do it again, it's just a cycle. So in a very literal sense of embracing the pain and going towards it for those reliefs. But yeah, I think also deal with a lot of patients who've had strokes or patients that have spinal cord injuries, which then you come into a lot of the mental health and psychological stuff that's really difficult as well. But working with someone who's had a stroke, a lot of times depression sets in almost instantly, and it's more of an adjustment disorder kind of a thing, where it is, I was perfectly fine yesterday, and now I can't eat for myself, I can't feed myself, I can't go to the bathroom by myself, I can't shower by myself, I can't put on socks, I can't put on underwear, right? And so you go from having this complete independence to having no independence. And for a lot of people, it's really debilitating emotionally.
It's like an internal prison.
Absolutely. And that can be really difficult. And the other part with strokes that can be very difficult is that a lot of the rehab is spontaneous rehab is what it's called, is that it comes back when it wants to come back. It doesn't come back because I'm working on your arm necessarily. It comes back at a time and place when it's ready to come back. And so there's a lot of things that we do to compensate, right? So like, yeah, maybe you can't use your arm yet, but we're going to teach you how to get dressed anyway. We're going to teach you how to shower by yourself anyway. We're going to give you some of the power back, but embracing that, understanding that, hey, I can't do this on my own the way I used to do it. So now I got to change how I do it, or someone else has to do it for me. And I think that's really one liberating about my job, is that I get to give a lot of people power that they didn't know they had. But it's also kind of really sad because there's a lot of people that just really can't deal with that emotional prison that you were talking about. It's just like, I lost everything. I'm very dependent on everybody now, especially when I would say most of us, if we asked what's the most important thing to you, you wouldn't say your independence. But I guarantee you if we took it away first, you would say that.
And
So-
we're not just talking like independence like we talk about with the country, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about like your independent ability to move freely. Like
Right
to,
now-
To get a drink of water.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go take a bike ride, you could go do it. If I stopped you from being able to do that,
I wouldn't like that.
yeah, it'd suck. Or a lot of people driving, right? Like, yep, we're here. We're taking your keys away. Well, that's one thing. But when you physically can't drive anymore, that's hard for a lot of people.
So and that's interesting because it seems like in the very early stages of rehabilitation, you're almost like trying to get the patient or the client to decouple their idea of what pain means. So pain means dysfunction because I was just injured, right? And now you're trying to temporarily, at least in the beginning, try and equate pain with progress, right?
Yeah.
So when you feel pain, when I move it beyond what you feel is capable, you feel that pain, I want you to think you're making progress, right?
Absolutely.
But then eventually you need to switch back because pain
isn't always good.
right. Pain is a useful tool to tell you what not to do afterwards,
Absolutely.
right? But it's almost like you're playing this mental switch right after they got their ego and their identity smashed,
Yes.
and now you're helping them rebuild and empowering them again and teaching them like, hey, you still are capable of a lot of things, and let's go towards the pain because you're going to progress a lot further.
Yep.
Do you notice a difference? And we see this in mental health, and I've read about it with surgical patients, but do you notice the placebo effect have a significant impact on your patient's recovery if they're, say, positive about their recovery and latch onto this idea that pain equals progress and like, okay, it's going to hurt, but crank it, versus people who are like really resistant and saying like, I'm never going to get better, I'm always going to be like this. Do you notice those spontaneous recoveries happening more frequently to people who are more positive about their recovery?
I wouldn't say it with like spontaneous recovery necessarily, but I would say with just about every other type of recovery, yeah. Because I think that even people have a terrible outlook, spontaneous recovery hits them the same way. They still get that function back, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're excited about it. It just kind of happens. Someone who has that positive mindset is more excited. They're probably going to start using it more, and then maybe the rest of the recovery will go better. But what I will say is kind of what you're asking me is exactly why I love my job. I love that I get to be with someone on some of their worst days, and I get to be a little bit of a spark. I get to be a little bit uplifting, and because, and not, I guess also not everybody thrives with that. Like that's not, some people that just went through a traumatic spinal cord injury, they're not going to want to see me and say, hey, like, how's your day going today? You know, that's not the first thing they want to hear. They just had a terrible day. But I think just having that positive, uplifting environment, I think it accents the placebo effect amazingly. You say, oh my gosh, like you're doing so much better than you did yesterday. Yesterday you couldn't even lift your hand to your head. Now you're going to be combing your hair tomorrow. You know, like just having that idea that, hey, I am getting better, I am getting stronger, I am getting more independent, I'm getting more functional. I think absolutely. I think people do a lot better when they're positive and optimistic towards recovery. I think sometimes that's just a barrier that we're fighting at the beginning of therapy. You know, I worked with so many patients that they didn't want to see me, they weren't feeling good. They'll do therapy tomorrow. And so we come back tomorrow, I'm not feeling good, we'll do therapy tomorrow. But the second we started therapy, it was like, wow, like I wish I had started this 2 weeks ago. Like I feel so much better already. I'm moving. one of the terms I love using is motion is lotion for your joint, right? Like we get you moving, you're already feeling better. You're getting those endorphins. You're getting all these other chemicals rushing through your body just because the blood's just filtering a little bit more. I just think that people, when they have the right mindset, they have the right attitude, and it's a positive one, I think almost always they tend to do better. Now that being said, I've still seen a lot of people with great mentalities, great attitudes go downhill as well. So I think that for most people, if I had the option and I had to choose either being really excited about rehab or not, I would choose to be really excited, just because obviously I do rehab. I know a lot more about what's going on with it, but I think you're going to go through it regardless. So why not just have the right attitude? Let's have a positive, uplifting, building attitude and get through it in a positive, less stressful, less depressing, less anxious way.
Yeah,
So.
and when you were describing, for the people who just don't do the therapy and then they just never move their arm, and then it like calcifies in place, and it's like that. It's stuck like that. Being of psychology, my mind went immediately to that, and people's responses to trauma, like emotional or psychological trauma too. Yeah. And it's almost like when a traumatic event happens, right? You either deal with the after effects of the trauma and get through it and grow from it, or you choose not to deal with the traumatic effects and you just kind of ignore them or sweep them under the rug or numb them out with something else. Mm-hmm. And then it's almost like that calcifies, that trauma calcifies, and then people can never break free from that initial psychological trauma that happened. Whereas the person who accepts that it happened and then says, this recovery is going to suck, but I'm going to push straight towards the trauma and how we get through that. Yeah, excuse you.
Thank you.
Then those people regain that flexibility or that range of motion again mentally. They regain that. Now, Avery, for you, and this is something that I've always been curious about. I've never had an opportunity to ask you about, and that is your faith, which you were just talking about, right? Yeah. Jake and I were talking about this a little bit before you got here, but you guys come from a completely different religious/spiritual background than I do. I kind of grew up going to Sunday schools as a kid. I think just because my mom wanted to pawn me off for a couple hours. And so I learned a little bit about, the story of Jesus and the Bible and stuff, but it never really took for me. And then in my teens, I became very resentful of organized religion because of all the terrible stories we hear and mind control and, child prostitution, all these things that happen that are real. And so I was really disillusioned by it and became an atheist. But then through addiction and recovery and my process through that, I had a spiritual experience that was undeniable. Yeah. And then that sparked my journey to discover, like, what the hell was that just happened in me? And I found Buddhism, and as soon as I started reading Buddhism, it like, the words jumped out of the page at me, and I'm like, these are all my thoughts written down on in Word, and I never knew that could be possible. So from that point on, for me, and we're talking about things that get us through those times that we feel like quitting, my spirituality and my faith and my hope that I glean from that connection, that is something significant for me that gets me through those times when I feel like quitting. Just knowing that there is something out there that is dictating or controlling or that is the blueprint for all this stuff, and it's beyond my understanding. Can you speak a little bit about, if you're comfortable, speak a little bit about your faith and like how that has been a real powerful thing for you in your journey?
And do you mean in terms of like the breaking through hard stuff, or just
breaking through hard stuff, but also like how you guys rely on your particular spiritual teachings to help inform your conceptualization of consciousness, right? So like Buddhism helps me understand this 3D reality and other dimensions and birth, life, death, afterlife, and the whole cycle of things and how I connect metaphysically with things. So Buddhism informs how I believe reality works. Okay. And I feel like your guys' particular faith probably informs how you believe.
Definitely, yeah. So, little background, I guess. Just growing up, I didn't really grow up in a religious family, like Easter, Christmas kind of family. but I was invited to go to a camp when I was in middle school, and that kind of changed everything for me. I was introduced to this guy named Jesus who was painted as a father figure, and for me that has always been something that I didn't have, and so I was really drawn to this idea that, oh, someone is caring for me, someone is there to take care of me. And I think from the outside, like, that might sound crazy, but for me, it was something that was really powerful, and I latched on to.
She's like a male role model.
Yes, exactly. Into this figure that loves me and cares for me and wants the best for me, but also, just wants to take care of me and stuff like that. But anyways, growing into that faith was really hard. I didn't really know what it meant to be a Christian, or if I even wanted to label myself a Christian, because you said there's so many negative things that come alongside these things. But I knew that I wanted to have a relationship with Jesus, and that, like you also said, there was something that changed and saved you, and it was undeniable, and it totally rewires us, I think, and my faith really did that and grew me as a person. As far as getting through hard things with my faith, there's lots of verses, I don't know, in the Bible, but just that idea of like having hope even in hard situations, and how if we hope, we're putting our trust in this bigger thing than us, God, for me personally, and putting my trust in, okay, I don't really know why this hard thing happened or why we fail this way, but he's going to use it and he's going to make us the best out of it. And just that idea that if I have hope, that hope is building my character, and my character builds my perseverance, and my perseverance builds my hope. And it's just this like cycle. And you talked about listening to podcasts, and I sometimes listen to sermons when I'm driving, and I was listening to this sermon, I don't even remember who the pastor was, but it's called The Hope Cycle, and it's just this idea of going through life and struggling, like we've been talking about, and struggling, but then growing from it and having hope and relying fully on this idea that he's bigger than myself. And like in your faith or your spirituality, do you call it faith? I don't know.
Both.
Okay.
You call it whatever. It's
Okay.
just a word.
Sorry, it's just a word. They're words. But that we are trusting this bigger thing than ourselves, and it just brings light to everything else. And like Jake talked about, that things are uncomfortable, but if we run through them, then we're getting that beautiful locust flower like you talked about. So.
Yeah, I think in my head, this phrase kept going through my head while you were speaking, and it's almost like in times of trouble, or in troubling times, you can say to yourself, everything's okay, and all of this is for my benefit.
Yeah. There's a reason in everything.
Yeah, there's a reason. I'm being taken care of. The universe is taking care of me in the best way it knows how, and I need to have faith and trust.
Regardless of if I can see it.
Exactly.
Regardless of how I feel right now. Feelings I've found are just like, get out of here.
Yeah, and I hear this over and over again. The universe has zero obligation to inform us of its plans.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Very much so.
We don't need to know the plans. We
We
just need to
don't.
trust that there is some sort of order going on, and that we're an integral part of that.
Exactly.
And we fit into that however we're going to fit into that.
Exactly. And that there's so much more to the story. Like you guys have been talking a lot about like loss and hurt and people getting stuck there, and it just is hard to see that because there is so much more, and there is even just out your front door, like getting up and having hope in the future, I think is really life-changing to anyone, to everyone. No matter what background or belief system you have, I think it's powerful, for sure.
Yeah, before you got here, we were talking about how all religions, underlying all these different doctrines and the masks that they all put on to differentiate themselves from each other, which are oftentimes really minute and insignificant details, they all boil down to the same basic piece of advice, to treat each other with kindness, treat each other with compassion, that love is that ultimate force that binds us all together, that binds us to ourselves, that binds us to our environment. And I don't know, it's one thing to hear that, but it's a whole nother thing to live it and to experience it. Because I can say, I love myself, but to really feel that,
or to live it out,
it's totally different, right? Like, and I'm not getting on you guys for your personal beliefs, but these are just things that I see. Like, I see people in Western religion, it happens in Eastern religion too. I just don't see it in the West here as much, but people will talk the talk but not walk the walk. So people will say, like, you need to live your life according to the Bible and Jesus and stuff, and they go to church every Sunday, but then every other day of the week, you know, they're putting poisons and toxins in their body, they're beating their kids, you know, they're doing all these things that are not in line with their spiritual values. That's not the same thing that we're talking about. We're talking about, you know, learning those lessons and then integrating them in a way that helps us, like you said at the very beginning, being our very best self.
Yeah, and growing from those things. Like, I think everyone's imperfect, and but if you just are content with living like that, and then going to church and putting on that smile and content with living in that hypocrisy or those lies, I think it's just, you're not becoming your best self, and you can't change if you are there forever. But if you're growing and you're learning from these mistakes, then you can move forward and advance. And I don't know.
Yeah, and you guys met at a church camp, right? Is that
Yeah, Young Life, yeah.
They get mad if you call Young Life church camp.
No,
I don't
sorry.
know why. I don't know. No, it's okay. I
That's
don't.
basically what it is.
It's church camp. I don't know, but every time you're like, oh, you're going to church camp, they're like, no, it's Young Life. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Anytime I think of like any sort of camp like that we engage in as kids, right away I go back to American Pie, like at band camp.
Oh gosh.
And like all the worst things happen at camp, right?
Absolutely.
Or like, oh man, I just saw a comedian the other day, and she was talking about those Pray the Gay Away camps, right?
Oh no, that's a thing?
Yeah, where like parents don't want their kids to be homosexual, so they'll send them to this religiously based camp to try and drill the homosexuality out of the kid. And the joke was hilarious because they're talking about how these parents want their kids not to be gay, and so they send them to this camp where they're surrounded by all these borderline homosexual camp counselors and stuff, and they're all put with the same sex people, and like it's not conducive to their initial goals in the first
Yeah.
place.
Oh
And so
my gosh.
so it just adds another layer to the hypocrisy and the idiocy that's behind some of these things.
Oh, that makes me so sad. I didn't even know that was real.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, so
Where's the love in that?
exactly. And that's, you know, a lot of people harp on religion or spirituality because we talk about it and we feel it, you know, in our lives and how enriching that love and that presence is. And then people will bash it saying like, well, yeah, if God was real, then why do all these bad things happen? And why are there wars? And why are there starving kids and stuff like that? But it's all a balance. You know, you can't have one good thing without the opposing negative thing in existence. Like there has to be that balance.
If everything was perfect, nothing would seem good. Like
Right.
nothing would seem any better.
And so when I was in Thailand, I was speaking to this guy from Nepal who's Buddhist, and he said, you know, they live in extreme poverty in Nepal, like compared to our standards. And I'm going over there, and he's making this suit for me. So he's like, oh, rich American, whatever, you know. He's making this custom suit for me, and we get to talking, and I ask him this question that I usually get like nasty looks from Americans when I ask them this question. When they bring up the idea of like starving kids and stuff. So I ask him like, so what do you think about, you know, your lot in life, being born in Nepal in poverty, and what do you think about that in comparison to like how you think about my life living in America, being in a wealthier country? And I fully expected him to have the American answer that says that you know, my situation is unfortunate and I was treated unfairly and I deserve better and things like that, right? And poor me.
Yeah.
But his response was so much more beautiful and resonated with me because he's Buddhist too. And he said, you know, I was born in that situation because I did something negative in a past life. Like that's my karma. And he didn't say it in a way as if like I'm being punished and poor me, but he's like, yeah, I accept that. And it's my place in life to make my situation better for my next lifetime, right? Because in Buddhism, you kind of recycle and you're reborn over and over and over again, and how you act in this life determines how your life is going to be set up in the next life, and so on and so forth. Karma's kind of like this momentum that keeps you going in one direction to the other. So he fully accepted, and he's like, yeah, I'm poor, and I grew up in poverty, and some of my siblings died of these diseases because we didn't have medical care, and that's just where I was born, and I'm perfectly happy with that. And it's my job to make other people happy. Like right now, it's my job to make you this suit and make you happy. And that just felt so beautiful and pure, and I didn't feel sorry for him, and I didn't pity him because of his situation. But I was like, yeah, this guy gets it, and he has so much less than we do here in the West.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So happiness is definitely not a reflection of what we have and materialism and things like that.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be circumstantial at all.
Yeah, happiness it's an innate right of humanity.
Yeah. In like the faith, like I don't know, with Jesus, there's this idea that like once you've accepted that into your heart, then you have this like overflowing fountain of joy that you can always live in, no matter you're hurting, no matter your struggle. Like you have a free gift to live in joy and to be content and to be happy with who you are and where you're going and the life you have. And like choosing that joy, I think, is choosing to walk in faith and choosing to trust God again. But yeah, I think like you said, religions all play back and forth on each other, and I don't think anybody ever gives that thought before dividing it. But yeah, I like your idea of happiness, and it is a thing. You can live.
But it's a choice.
It's definitely
absolutely.
a choice.
And you have to quit guilt. We need to quit guilt tripping ourselves and telling ourselves that we don't deserve it.
Yes.
It's up to us each individually to give ourselves permission to be happy.
Oh yeah.
Even if I flip somebody off today, even if I cause somebody some kind of harm unintentionally, I still have a right to be happy if I choose to be.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't have a right to be happy at the expense of others, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Right? So, with that, I'll leave that with all of you in the audience to contemplate a little bit more. I want to thank you guys again for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having
It was
us.
a lot of fun.
It was fun. I wish we could talk more.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot. Yeah.
Well, you guys are moving to Vegas at the end of the week,
Yikes.
and unfortunately, we won't be able to train with you as often as we want to, but we'll come out and train with you out
I
there.
love
You're
that.
always welcome at Z's,
Thank
and
you.
we can always do these podcasts through computer too.
Awesome.
Ooh, digital.
So we'll just do like a conference Skype type call
Yeah,
in the
awesome.
future. I want to hear all
Awesome.
about your guys' new transition and
Yeah.
new jobs and all that
Thank
fun
you.
stuff. So thank you guys for
Yeah.
contributing to the podcast and to all the listeners out there. I know that they're going to take something from what we talked about today.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Conversations with the Mind podcast is sponsored by mindops.com. You can find us at www.mind-ops.com. We're an eclectic counseling company providing mental health and mental performance services to individuals, small and large groups, teams, businesses, military, through face-to-face sessions or at a distance using phone or confidential video chat apps. We bring a unique Buddhist Western lens and specialize in general psychotherapy for all mental difficulties, sport and performance psychology for performance enhancement, addiction counseling for any maladaptive or destructive habits, and psychedelic integration therapy to make the most from your visionary medicine work. We are available as well for corporate workshops to address the needs of your employees' wellness.